So hi, my name is Reddy, and I'm part of the VxRail product management team. I'm part of Dell EMC. This is my first field day that I have presented at, so I'm really excited to be in front of you, but I've literally watched hundreds of them, right, for years and years and years. They're fantastic, so thank you for having me. As Varun mentioned earlier, I was also going to tee it up. The context of the presentation that I want to give to you about VxRail is why VxRail is being chosen for these cloud platforms, right? And so if we look at Mark's presentation when he comes out and talks about Cloud Foundation, and Kit will be talking about VMware Cloud on Dell EMC, you know, there are core, edge, and cloud components to all of these, but the common thread will be at the core will be VxRail, at the edge will be VxRail as well in both of these solutions. And my job is to tell you a little bit why VxRail makes sense for them. I'll start off pretty high level because I'm not sure exactly how much you know about VxRail, but VxRail is a hyperconverged solution brought to you jointly by Dell EMC and VMware. It is the combination of the #1 compute platform in PowerEdge with the #1 software-defined stack from VMware. We understand we're in a truly blessed position at VxRail by having two #1 products, and our job is to kind of bring them together and make them work better together. We will spend a little bit of time on the middle area, talking about lifecycle management and serviceability, and some of the more robust features on the right-hand side. But I don't want to give you a complete overview of VxRail, because what you really want to know is all about clouds and hybrid clouds. But we're just kind of the underlying infrastructure that makes it possible, and I'll talk to you why it makes sense. Now, being part of Dell, I would be remiss if I did not talk about PowerEdge, right? And I'm not going to drain a slide. I'm not going to go through all the features and functionality. But what you need to know is that with VxRail, using PowerEdge, we have all the configuration flexibility to be able to define things like compute intensive, or memory intensive, or storage dense, or GPU accelerated, so that we can match all of the use cases for the customers on their in their data center and at the edge of their location. That's all I wanted to say about hardware. But if you want to know more, I'll tell you all about it. When I kind of think about VxRail and say, what is it that we do, right? Because we already have the VMware software stack, right, which is outstanding, and we already have the Dell PowerEdge hardware platform. Don't these two already work together? And the answer is, of course they do, right? That you can run VMware software on Dell hardware. But the VxRail organization is all about automation, right? We're all about validation, and we're all about security. Now, I'm going to walk you through a few of these and give you some examples that I believe are useful, once again, in the context of Cloud Field Day and the higher level cloud management platforms. So when I'm looking at automation, there are a few of them that kind of come to mind. One of them is configuration automation, right? We have hundreds of engineers that are working on various different aspects of automation with VxRail, right? So we make it very easy to stand up clusters, right? We automate hundreds of manual tasks. We are doing system level validation of dependencies, right? Routing information, you know, DNS entries, actually our DNS servers, DNS servers, directory validation, right? So we're going through as part of this automation, and we're not only standing up our clusters, but we're also going out and checking external dependencies. We're doing this using VMware best practices, right? So we're automating those best practices. And if you are deploying VxRail with Dell top-of-rack switching, we also automate the configuration of the switch. So you can take a pair of Dell power switches and a bunch of VxRails out of the box. You can rack them, stack them, cable them, and when you turn them on, they auto-discover each other. And then you can import a configuration file into the VxRail, and it will not only configure the cluster, but it will configure the network. And it actually configure the network first, right? So all the nodes can talk to each other, right? But it brings everything up in a very prescriptive way to get you to value faster. Right, so that's an area of configuration, like it's interesting, or an area of automation. Another area of automation is serviceability. So configuration, day one, right? We've got it up and running. But I'm going to be running this cluster for years, right? What about ongoing serviceability? So we do that as well. We're doing aggregation of events and alerts and alarms. We're doing correlation of events and alerts and alarms. We're automating things like support ticket creation. It may be parts dispatch or an on-site technician that needs to show up. We're doing proactive health checks, right? So we're going through and we're checking all the different systems, the hardware and the software on the customer's behalf, right? And we also automate a lot of serviceability workflows, right? We make it easy to do things like add capacity or replace failed components or add new nodes, clusters of new nodes, right? It could be in a batch mode. You could add, well, as many as you want, right? But let's say 5 or 10 nodes to a cluster, you can do it all at once. And once again, if you're doing it with Dell power switches, the new nodes, when they get turned on, the switch will recognize that they're VxRails, and they'll say, I'm already configured to manage a VxRail cluster on these switches. It'll apply the switch settings to all the new nodes, and then the nodes can be added in bulk to the existing cluster, right? So it really makes things a lot faster from a customer perspective.
Where's it getting the configuration information from?
So we do an on-site kind of workshop with the customer, right? And we fill out kind of all the data in advance, and we have it's called like a pre-site questionnaire, right? And they'll put in the VLANs and IP addresses and all this associated info, host names, what have you. And then we will create from that spreadsheet or the pre-site questionnaire, we create a JSON file, right? And that JSON file can then just be imported. But yeah, of course, someone has to map all this out. It's not just magic, right?
Exactly.
Like, I mean, we'd like it to be magic eventually, but it's not there, right? You have to do your homework with the customer, but customers do that anyway, and then they still have to be walked through kind of a manual, wizard that people use all the time, right? Put in these 5 fields, but it's still hundreds of things that they have to enter, right? And we have just automated that by creating that JSON, importing it, and then automating the tasks in the background.
So if workloads move, you're still going to have to go and manually reconfigure those switches.
So on day 2, if you move a workload, let's say from a physical port on a node to a different physical port on the node, in the background, we will go and we automate the moving of the VLAN that requires to the new port. Right, so that's all automated as well. So it's not from the switching perspective, it's not just day 1, it's day 2.
And is there anything, you mentioned health check. So anything that is going to know which ports are not in use and shut those down to minimize the attack surface?
I don't think that we do that, no.
Good thing to do though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think that that's something that we do today.
Okay.
Right, but we can add it if you want to fill out a request. I'll make it happen. I'm product management. That's my job.
Okay.
So I've got a couple things. Well,
sure.
One, just real quick, using ZTP probably at some level, right, to do the switch configs and deploy, which piggybacks on what her question was. Importing the JSON file, building the config.
Yep.
ZTP, build the configs on the switches. This also includes, and I'm going to claim ignorance here, this also includes building vCenter, adding all the hosts.
For sure.
All that. Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
You're building the entire cluster.
It's the whole,
right? The vSAN data store,
right.
all the ESXi hosts, right? Configuring the physical interfaces, right? And like I said, if you're using Dell power switches, the switches, right? And
are those the ONI switches?
Are they what?
The ONI switches?
Yeah, the only switches that we provide the full automation for are Dell power switches.
Right.
They're the only ones that have the name Dell in it, which we found is really good for job security. I want to let you know, but we're also leveraging Dell. The power switches have something called Smart Fabric Services, right? And that's the enabling technology that we use to kind of get all this up and running very quickly.
Yep.
And just quick question, do you have 400 gig yet, or are you 4100?
On nodes, the vast majority of our customers on nodes are using 10 or 25. We
Okay.
have recently introduced 100 to offer higher bandwidth for workloads, right? So people can do that, but no, we're not anywhere close to 400 on a node basis yet.
Okay, and
But the switch backplane, sure, like the spine and the super spines.
yeah,
sure.
and I was just going to say that. Please tell me you're telling your customers leaf spine
Yes.
architecture.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Yes, thank you. We can go on.
All right.
Yes.
That's no, I love
yeah.
the questions,
Yeah, yeah.
right? The one that's going to come up time and time again, probably because I love talking about it, is lifecycle management, right? And this is automation around performing full updates to your clusters, right? These are non-disruptive rolling upgrades. They're including the VMware and all of the Dell firmware BIOS drivers, right? We're doing it across multiple generations, right? So this is a lot of automation where a customer they want to get to a new version of ESXi, right? They download an upgrade bundle from us, and then we go through and we will go through and update all the components that need to be updated on a node by node rolling basis, right? So lifecycle management is kind of an incredibly powerful piece of automation for us.
So
Yes.
in terms of adding additional nodes to an existing VxRail cluster, is there a capability to expand storage by adding more storage nodes, or do all the nodes have to be consistent within a cluster? Because I know that's
Yeah,
a
so
sticking point at times.
Yeah, so so we use vSAN, right? So right now we don't have the capability of adding storage-only nodes, but we can add storage-dense nodes, right? So we can have nodes that have more drive capacity, right? So you don't always have to go with, like some people go with a 1U form factor that has 10 drives. We can go with a 2U form factor that has 24 drives, right? So we can add more capacity that way.
Okay.
Right.
You can scale the compute and storage in different ways.
You can fine-tune it in different ways. That's right.
Okay.
That's right. But there is no storage only at this point in time.
Okay.
So another quick dumb question.
No questions
I
are dumb.
assume-
Only answers are dumb.
I assume Kubernetes is part of this as well at some level coming, right?
I think you might hear about it in the next presentation.
Awesome. Let's do
I
it.
think there's a chance.
I haven't heard
that it may come up.
Kubernetes today. So
But you can actually Google VxRail and Kubernetes because we talked about it a lot at VMworld, but that's not the thunder that I want to bring to the table today.
Thank you.
Right. So building off of lifecycle management, this is really interesting, but lifecycle management is not our secret sauce. That's not what we do, right? What we do is we do validation, right? We have a large team of engineers whose sole job is to do test and validation, right? And when we talked about, upgrading full stack, it really is full stack, right? It is the BIOS, it's the firmwares, it's the drivers, and it's the various VMware components. And in a given server, there can be between 8 and 12 upgradable firmwares in that product, right? And one of those categories is drives. And you could have 24 drives, and they can be of different types, different vendors, what have you. And we do this across generations, right? So existing VxRail customers could have clusters of Haswell or Broadwell or Skylake and now Cascade Lake. And these are different generations of servers with different generations of components with different generations of drives. This is a nightmare to manage for customers, right? Because they have to know the exact configurations of all the devices in their environment. They have to manually go map these against the hardware compatibility lists for the target software that they want to get to. They want to get to ESXi 6.7 update 3 because there's something really cool in there. But how does this affect all of my servers in my environments across multi-generations? We do all this testing. We do all the validation. We determine what goes into those upgrades, right, based upon our testing. We don't choose the latest and greatest, right, because it may not be the most stable, right? So our testing figures out what needs to go in there, and then we use Lifecycle Management to do the how to make it happen, right? So we call this known good state, right? And our job is to take you from one known good state to another known good state, right? And that's really a huge benefit to the customers. But and by the way, in the public cloud, nobody worries about that, right? Customers don't worry about that because the cloud providers are doing that for them. We're doing this for customers for their on-premises, right? For their on-premises equipment, right? This is like major benefit.
So is this an automated way of doing the firmware updates based on a known good state? And is there a way to do an automated backout should anything fail? Because one problem for server teams is they used to spend entire weekends doing firmware updates, and
Sure.
if something went wrong, you know, Monday was a disaster.
Right, because they didn't test as much as they could have, right? There's just too complex, right? So number one is it is a fully automated update process so that when we're taking a node into maintenance mode, we're updating the firmwares that we choose, and we're updating the software that we choose to update at that point in time. Some things can be rolled back. Not all things can be rolled back, right? So some software can be rolled back, some firmware can be rolled back. As a matter of fact, we had an example earlier this year where one of the firmwares that we updated to started to exhibit problems after being live for 60 days, right? And so the immediate fix, so which escaped everybody's testing, right? But after 60 days, one would think that that would be a memory leak, right, that was causing problems, right? So after 60 days, we started seeing problems. We issued a patch that just rolled back that one firmware, right? So yes, it can be done, but it's not capable of being done all the time on all firmwares or software.
How well does this work with customers who may have systems with very low bandwidth? Like maybe they're setting up systems in foreign countries or other places around the world where, you know, you just have bad links.
Sure. There are a couple of different ways of doing it. One of them is clearly the download bundles are distributed over the internet, right? They can be downloaded. But we have a lot of customers who may be in locations that have bad links, or they may be at sea, or they may be wherever else. And so what usually happens is people download it, and then they put it on like a thumb drive or something like that, and then that gets shipped out, right? And that's how people address those. But this is not an NDA session, so I can't really tell you a lot about like cool things that I know, but I have a great answer for that question, but I can't tell you. Sorry.
So I'm going to ask a question. I'm sure you're going to say you can't tell me either, but that's cool. As far as like the host, so when you roll VxRail in, do they come pre-configured with ESXi? Is everything already built when you ship it, or is it built on site?
Yeah. So in the factory, we build into every VxRail. We have ESXi, we have vSAN, we have vCenter, we have the VxRail manager, we have kind of whatever we've chosen from like a firmware perspective. But it's in an unconfigured state, right?
But it's too.
It's already there. It's already there, but you have to go in and it'll let apply your configuration and
so
build it out.
VxRail manager, and again, I'm playing ignorance here because I mean, obviously, I've heard of VxRail, I've never touched it. But as far as VxRail, so is the manager piece the one that controls, that does all the Pixie boots and all that to build the host? So it has the
Yeah,
ESXi.
it's a term that incorporated all of our automation, all the services that we needed, the APIs that we were exposing, and then the UI that we were exposing. That was VxRail Manager,
Gotcha.
right? But it's more than just
Sure.
that. And that
But there's
I
a
actually
repo
have an
and some other
architecture slide that a little bit later that I'll show you. That hopefully will help explain that. But it's a wrapper term.
And one other thing,
Yes.
and I'm going to be quiet. Back to the maintenance thing, like she was talking about, I assume part of that logic that's built in, if an upgrade goes bad, it's smart enough to say, you know what, take this out of the mix, redeploy, like a hypervisor if it went to.
Yeah, it depends what
Right.
fails, right?
Right.
That's the answer.
Sure,
Is
right.
it depends.
It depends.
I'd love to tell you that, of course, like we handle all scenarios.
There's a lot to it. Yes, I know.
So Rick, from a partner ecosystem, so if I'm a Dell networking client today, love the white box approach of Dell, and I partnered with Cumulus or Big Switch or one of the other network operating systems, how does that play into kind of this HCI platform when I've already kind of bought into one of the other Dell approved approaches to networking?
That's actually a great question. So with hyperconverged and VxRail, we will work with any top of rack switch. We just do not automate other switches, right? So most of our customers are Cisco, Arista type switches, right? But we're trying to bring added value into the Dell portfolio. When I talk about the Dell Power Switch, what I didn't say is it's dependent upon OS 10, but I did say Smart Fabric Services. So if someone buys an open networking switch from Dell and deploys a different operating system on top of it, like Cumulus or Big Switch, the automation that we do is not going to work on that, although it's the same physical switch, because we need Smart Fabric Services.
So it's dependent on DNOS 10, is what you said?
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Okay.
I wanted to give a brief example. Dell Technologies takes security very seriously. And I swear I'm going to tie these together, so bear with me on this journey. But Dell takes security very seriously. We do a lot of federal compliance. We do a lot of trade compliance. We do it as a system, right? It's not PowerEdge. It's not just VMware software stack. We do all these at a system. But what I really wanted to focus on was the middle column, right? Because I think this is also the one that goes to highlight kind of the power of Dell Technologies and VxRail. Right, so we have a product security office. We have to adhere to all the security standards. We have to build all of our applications using hardened operating systems. They go through and they test prior to every release to make sure that we don't have services inadvertently left on, we don't have vulnerabilities in services that are enabled, that we haven't put shareware in there, whatever. They do all of this to make sure that Dell is providing customers with a secure product. However, right, there are vulnerabilities that come up all the time nowadays, right? And all of us have to be very rapid to respond, and we have to be very transparent about those. Right, so there's a product security incident response team. How this plays into my story is that as these come up, there's a member on my staff and there's a member in engineering who's part of the team that gets ready in whenever there is a vulnerability that could affect our product, whether it's from VMware, whether it's from Dell, whether it's our own code, doesn't matter. Right, these two individuals get read in. They start monitoring kind of the impact of the problem. They start tracking the delivery of a fix. Right, they know that a fix is coming, and maybe today's Friday, maybe it's coming on Monday. They go back to our test and validation team, and while they can't tell them what's wrong, they say, you're going to have something hot coming in on Monday. Like, clear the decks, be prepared. right? That fix comes in on Monday. It gets thrown right into our validation team. Our validation team, all hands on deck, like goes through and does a full battery of tests. We get that into an upgrade bundle. We get it out to the customers, and then they have an automated way of getting it into their environment and getting it fixed, right? So security may be the why someone wants to update. Validation is what they're updating to. And lifecycle management is how they are applying those updates. But it's all like dependent upon automation and speed, because a customer who is most concerned with applying a security fix, government agencies, regulated industries, healthcare, finance, what have you, energy, they have a time window that they need to meet to have that fix in place to ensure that their environment is secure, right? Our validation on their behalf and our automated way of getting it out into their hands, that is a requirement for them. You know, so I talked about how customers love automated lifecycle management. Absolutely. Customers love the validation. Absolutely. But for people who have to respond and respond quickly, offloading the testing and validation and giving them a way to get it out quickly is critical, right? So building solutions on top of Rail, these are the key things that I think we bring to higher value solutions.
Because you're controlling the whole stack.
Because we're controlling the whole stack,
Right.
and we're
Yeah.
providing it to you very quickly, right? So this literally is my last slide. I was only trying to do a handful of slides, and I know we were at that. Are we down to that? Okay. So we were talking before about VxRail Manager, right? I think in the middle bucket is like VxRail Manager. It's all the different services that we have that are part of kind of our automation, right? But then we have APIs, right? We have some, you know, downstream, or I call these southbound APIs, right? There are private APIs. We use them for the serviceability. We use them for the switches. We use them for kind of our own purposes. But then we have all of our northbound APIs, right? VxRail is managed inside the vSphere web client, right? So we have a vCenter plugin. So the vSphere web client is where VMware administrators live day to day, right? And we brought all the VxRail functionality into that vSphere web client. How do we enable that? We enable that with APIs. We have opened all of those APIs where once you clicked a button to perform an action on the cluster, now all of that's available through APIs.
Real quick,
Yes,
that northbound API right there at the top
yes,
is for VxRail as well as all vSphere components?
as well as other way.
Let me say that differently. For VxRail specific APIs, as well as vCenter APIs, anything that I can do through the new API through vCenter. Is that clear?
Yeah, so these are separate. These are separate.
Okay.
But we adhere to the vSphere API syntax.
Okay.
Right, and you can do all these in like PowerShell, right? So we were trying to align to. You can do it in something else, right? But we.
You saw my face. I know.
Yeah. But this was we were trying to align to how people automate VMware. What would be the best value to them, right?
Okay.
So we wanted to align
that's
to
fair.
the syntax.
I'm just trying to understand. So when I'm trying to programmatically do a thing in the stack, do I need to go to multiple API endpoints, or can I hit one?
No,
do a
you're,
bunch of stuff.
For a vanilla VxRail cluster, and this may be different if you were to do it with Cloud Foundation, right? And Mark can talk about that. But for a vanilla VxRail cluster, there are different endpoints depending upon what you're trying to do.
Okay.
Right. We're exposing like the automation, like the examples of the automation that I provided earlier.
Lifecycle management.
Those are the things that we expose as APIs, right? But VMware has already exposed what they do as APIs.
They're just separate. That's fine.
So
They're just separate.
That brings up a hiring question, which is
Yeah.
who's the target for this API and this level integration from a operational perspective? Is this designed to meet the needs of data center operators, or is this meant to be consumed by what level?
Yep. So we started this API journey a couple of years ago, right? And where we started it was with very large customers that were deploying a large number of edge clusters, right? So they literally had north of 1,000 sites that they wanted to do it, and they didn't want to go in and click on a button 1,000 times to go update a cluster, right? And they wanted to be able to not only issue an API call, but they wanted to control the order in which things were done, and they wanted to monitor the status, and they wanted to stop if things started going south, and like they wanted more control over how they did upgrades in particular, right? So we started with that. Then we started getting into large accounts where they were modernizing their enterprise data center. We started getting into service provider accounts where they want to do everything programmatically. They just want to dump boxes into a rack somewhere. Someone cables them, they turn them on, they walk away, right? And then everything gets provisioned, right? So there've been, and additionally, it's been really great for the 2 follow-on presentations you're going to hear today, because they can leverage the same APIs and they can orchestrate actions on VxRail, right? So they're controlling what's going on in the VxRail world because we have those APIs, right? So there are many different users of it. We have channel partners actually that are building frameworks around our APIs because they have a large volume of VxRail customers and they want to show more value add, right?
The access and the usage of those APIs are governed by some rules that can be defined inside the VxRail interface. So there is only one-way access.
I didn't understand that question.
Sorry.
It's okay. No, it's probably me. I'm not the API guru.
I mean, if there are some role-based access control.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. So security,
Yeah.
that same person on my team who deals with all the vulnerabilities, she kind of is all over everything being secured.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And believe it or not, that is the end of my deck. I tried to cut down slides for you because I wanted to have an interactive conversation.